The great hall of Nexus Station stretched out like a crystal cave, its walls made of some clear material that showed the stars beyond. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows, their voices creating a constant buzz of different languages and sounds. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking plants, and a few resembled nothing anyone from Earth had ever seen before. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center podium, his blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. His forearms moved as he spoke, gesturing to the holographic displays that floated around him. The hegemony representative had been giving his monthly report for nearly 2 hours, and most of the delegates were only half listening. Trade disputes between the Corvin Empire and the Stellar Federation have been resolved, Zethkar announced, his voice carrying easily through the hall's perfect acoustics. The mining rights on Kepler 442 have been awarded to the highest bidder, as per council regulations. A few delegates made notes on their personal devices. Others simply stared out at the stars or whispered to their assistants. These monthly sessions were usually boring affairs filled with paperwork and minor territorial adjustments that affected billions of lives, but rarely made headlines. Zethkar continued reading from his list. The Veltar Dominion has completed their expansion into the former Keflin territories. All resistance has been eliminated. The pacification was deemed necessary for regional stability. At this, several delegates nodded approvingly. The Veltar representative, a tall being covered in gray scales, raised one clawed hand in what might have been a salute. The Keflin had been troublemakers anyway, always complaining about their treatment and refusing to accept their place in the Galactic. Order, resource allocation for the Outer Rim defense grid has been approved, Zethkar went on. However, patrol schedules will be reduced by 30% due to budget constraints. More murmurs from the audience, but nothing that seemed to worry anyone too much. Pirates in the Outer Rim were always a problem, but they rarely posed a serious threat to the major civilizations. And finally, Zethkar said, scrolling down his holographic display, the human delegation has formally withdrawn from council membership, effective immediately. The announcement hung in the air for a moment. A few delegates looked up from their devices, but most continued with whatever they had been doing. The Veltar representative actually smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Good riddance, muttered someone from the back rows. Zethkar paused, as if expecting some reaction, but when none came, he simply moved on to the next item. The humans had always been odd members of the council anyway. They were too emotional, too quick to interfere in matters that did not concern them. Their departure would probably make things run more smoothly. In the human section of the Great Hall, the chairs sat empty. Ambassador Sarah Chun had delivered the withdrawal notice 3 days ago, a simple document that cited irreconcilable differences in fundamental values as the reason for humanity's departure. There had been no angry speeches, no threats, no demands for apologies. The humans had simply packed up their things and left. Council Security Chief Morden watched from his observation deck as the last human transport ship undocked from Nexus Station. The ship was a simple design, nothing fancy or threatening about it. It turned slowly and headed toward the jump gate that would take it back to human space. Within minutes, it was gone. Morden had been expecting some kind of dramatic exit. Humans were known for their theatrics, after all. They had caused quite a stir 2 years ago when they had tried to intervene in the Veltar expansion. Something about protecting innocent civilians and preventing genocide. The council had voted against human intervention, of course. The Veltar had legitimate territorial claims, and the Keflin resistance was clearly unlawful, but instead of drama, the humans had left quietly, almost efficiently. Morden found that disturbing for reasons he could not quite explain. The human embassy on Nexus Station had been cleared out with remarkable speed. Their staff had worked around the clock for 3 days, packing equipment and files into shipping containers. They had been polite to everyone they met, even friendly. But there had been something in their eyes, something that made Morden uncomfortable. On the final day, Ambassador Shun had personally delivered a data package to the council archives. It was a large file, containing what she said were personnel records, technology specifications, and detailed reports on every human operation conducted under Council authority. She had smiled when she handed it over, but the smile had not reached her eyes. "For your records," she had said simply. "Everything we did, everyone we worked with, every mission we completed in service to the Council. It might be useful someday." The archive clerk had accepted the package without much interest. It would be filed away with thousands of other documents that nobody would ever read. Standard procedure for departing member species. Now, 3 days. Later, the human sections of Nexus Station stood empty. Their embassy had been cleaned so thoroughly that it looked like it had never been occupied. Even the computer systems had been wiped clean, leaving only the basic operating programs that came with the station's original construction. Delegate Serenthi of the Aldari Confederation stood in the empty human embassy, looking around at the bare walls and empty rooms. She had been one of the few council members who had actually worked with the humans on various projects. They had been good partners, she thought, reliable, honest, and surprisingly effective when they set their minds to something. The humans had helped her people during the plague years, when an unknown disease had swept through Aldari space. While other council members had offered sympathy and small donations, the humans had sent medical teams and research ships. They had worked day and night until they found a cure, saving millions of Aldari lives. Serenthi touched the wall where a picture of the human homeworld had once hung. Earth, they called it. A blue and green world that looked almost too peaceful to be real. The humans had always talked about their planet with a strange mixture of love and sadness, as if they were afraid of losing it. "They will be back," said a voice behind her. Serenthi turned to see Morden standing in the doorway. The security chief looked troubled, his usually calm face showing signs of worry. "Perhaps," Serenthi replied, "but I do not think they will come back as friends." Morden stepped into the empty room and looked around. "They left too quietly, completely. In my experience, when someone disappears that thoroughly, it means they are planning something. Or they are simply done with us," Serenthi said. "Perhaps we pushed them too far." The security chief shook his head. "Humans do not give up easily. I have read their files, studied their history. When they are truly angry, they do not run away. They plan, they prepare, and then they act." Serenthi felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard the stories about human history, about the wars. They had fought on their own world before joining the Galactic community. They were capable of great kindness, but also of great violence when pushed beyond their limits. "What do you think they will do?" she asked. Morden was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars through the embassy's main window. "I think," he said finally, "that we are about to find out what happens when you dismiss the one species in the galaxy that actually cared about doing the right thing." Outside, space traffic continued as normal around Nexus Station. Ships came and went, carrying goods and passengers across the galaxy. The great machine of galactic civilization continued to turn, seemingly unaffected by the departure of one small species from a distant corner of space. But in the depths of space, human ships were already moving toward destinations unknown, carrying orders that no one in the Council had bothered to ask about. The quiet exodus had begun, and the galaxy would soon learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is ignore someone who is trying to help you. 6 months had passed since the humans left Nexus Station, and Captain Vexstar was having the worst month of his trading career. His cargo ship, the Stellar Wind, had been attacked 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Each time the pirates had seemed to know exactly where he would be and what he was carrying. Vexstar sat in the pilot's chair of his damaged ship, staring at the emergency repairs his crew had made to the hull. The latest attack had been different from the others. The pirates had moved like they were part of some organized military force, not the usual desperate criminals who haunted the Outer Rim. "Captain," called his communications officer, a young Corvan with bright orange skin, "we are receiving a distress signal from the merchant vessel Dawn's Promise. They say they are under attack by unknown ships." Vexstar sighed and checked his navigation display. The Dawn's promise was only 2 hours away at full speed, but his own ship was barely holding together, and he had no weapons that could help against an organized pirate fleet. "Send their location to the nearest council patrol," he ordered. "There is nothing we can do to help them." The communications officer worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with a confused expression. "Captain, the nearest council patrol is 8 hours away. By the time they arrive, the Dawn's promise will be gone," Vextar finished. "Just like the others." This was the new reality in the Outer Rim. Pirate attacks had increased by 300% since the beginning of the year. The Council's response had been to form a committee to study the problem. Then they had formed another committee to study the first committee's recommendations. Meanwhile, merchant ships disappeared and trade routes became too dangerous to use. Vextar remembered when things had been different. 2 years ago, there had been human patrol ships in this sector. Small, fast vessels that seemed to appear whenever pirates showed up. The humans had not waited for committee approvals or paperwork. They had simply acted, driving off the pirates and escorting merchant ships to safety. The Council had complained about human interference in their jurisdiction. They had filed formal protests about unauthorized military actions in Council space. The humans had apologized and promised to follow proper procedures in the future. Now there were no human patrol ships, and merchant captains like Vextar had to choose between bankruptcy and death on the former Kethlin homeworld of Tisara. The morning sun rose over empty cities and silent streets. The Veltar occupation force had completed their work 6 months ago, and the planet was now officially part of the Veltar Dominion. Governor Kreshtar walked through the main city center, admiring the efficiency of the cleansing operation. The Kethlin had been relocated to proper facilities on other worlds, where they could be monitored and controlled. The troublemakers had been eliminated, of course. It was regrettable, but necessary for the greater good of galactic stability. Kreshtar paused in front of what had once been a Kethlin school. The building was intact but empty, its windows dark and its playground silent. Soon, proper Veltar colonists would arrive to make use of these structures. The planet would be productive again, contributing to the Dominion instead of wasting resources on pointless resistance. "Governor," called his aide, a younger Veltar with nervous energy, "we have received reports from our expansion fleet. They are ready to begin operations in the Kareth system." Kreshtar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. The Kareth were another species that refused to accept Veltar authority. Like the Kethlin, they would need to be taught the benefits of cooperation. "Excellent. How long until they reach the target system?" 3 days, sir." The fleet commander expects minimal resistance. "The Kareth have no significant military forces." "Good," Kreshtar said. "The Council will appreciate our efficiency in bringing order to these chaotic regions." What the governor did not know was that his expansion fleet would never reach the Kareth system. In fact, it would disappear completely, leaving behind only scattered debris and confused distress signals that spoke of impossible ships appearing from nowhere. In the refugee camps on the barren moon of Nexus 7, former Kethlin civilians tried to survive on the minimum supplies provided by Council humanitarian services. The camps were overcrowded, undersupplied, and located on worlds that could barely support life. Miracon had once been a teacher on Tisara. Now she spent her days helping distribute food rations and caring for the sick and injured refugees who had survived the Veltar cleansing operation. The Council had promised that the camps were temporary, but 6 months had passed with no sign of improvement. Children, who had once played in green fields, now sat listlessly in gray prefabricated shelters. The elderly grew weaker each day, unable to adapt to the harsh conditions. Medical supplies were rationed so strictly that many treatable illnesses became fatal. "Teacher Miracon," called a small voice. She turned to see little Jenner, a 6-year-old, whose parents had not survived the evacuation from Tisara. The child had been having nightmares every night since arriving at the camp. "What is it, little one?" Miracon asked, kneeling down to the child's level. "I had a good dream last night," Jenter said quietly. I dreamed that the kind humans came. Back, they had big ships and they took us to a green world where we could play outside again. Miracon felt tears forming in her eyes. The humans had tried to help during the Veltar invasion. They had sent ships and offered to evacuate Kethlan civilians to safety. But the Council had forbidden it, saying that human interference would only make the situation worse. "That sounds like a beautiful dream," Miracon whispered, pulling the child close. "Maybe someday it will come true." She did not believe her own words, but she could not bear to crush the child's hope. Deep in the bureaucratic maze of Nexus Station, Ambassador Zethkar sat in his private office reading intelligence reports. The documents painted a troubling picture, but one that he was not sure how to interpret. Human space had gone dark. Not physically dark, but communicatively silent. The dozens of human colonies that had maintained regular contact with the galactic community had stopped responding to messages. Trade ships that entered human territory simply did not come back out. There had been no declarations of war, no hostile actions, no threats. The humans had simply pulled back behind their borders and sealed themselves off from the rest of the galaxy. Even their automated trading posts had shut down, leaving service temporarily unavailable messages for anyone who tried to access them. "Sir," said his assistant, a nervous Carvan who had been working late every night for weeks, "the Aldari delegation has requested another meeting about the human situation." Zethkar rubbed his forehead with two of his four hands. Delegate Saranthe had been increasingly vocal about her concerns regarding humanity's withdrawal. She seemed to think that the humans were planning something dangerous. "Tell them I am busy," Zethkar said. "The human question was officially closed 3 months ago. There is nothing more to discuss." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, she mentioned something about unusual sensor readings near the border of human space. Ships that do not match any known configurations." "Sensor ghosts?" Zethkar said dismissively. "Equipment malfunctions. The Aldari are known for their overactive imaginations." But privately, Zethkar was worried. His own intelligence sources had reported similar anomalies. Ships that appeared on sensors but could not be contacted. Energy signatures that did not match any known technology. And most disturbing of all, reports from the border regions that pirate attacks had simply stopped. Not decreased. Stopped entirely. Pirates were still operating in the inner systems, but any group that ventured too close to human space seemed to vanish without a trace. There were no distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. The pirates simply disappeared, as if they had never existed. Zethkar told himself that these were unrelated incidents. Perhaps the pirates had found easier targets elsewhere. Perhaps they had been destroyed by other criminal organizations. There were many possible explanations that did not involve the humans, but deep down he knew better. The humans had not simply withdrawn from galactic society. They had transformed into something else, something that operated by rules the Council did not understand. The silence from human space was not empty. It was full of purpose, and that purpose remained hidden from the rest of the galaxy. As Zethkar worked late into the station's artificial night, he could not shake the feeling that the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had dismissed the one species that had consistently tried to protect the innocent and maintain justice. Now that species was out there in the dark, planning something that none of them could predict or control. The quiet exodus was beginning to show its true nature, and the galaxy was slowly learning what it meant to lose its guardians. 2 years had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council, and Admiral Kostar stood before the assembled delegates with a confident smile on his scaled face. The great hall of Nexus Station buzzed with satisfied murmurs as he presented his latest military report. "Fellow delegates," Kostar announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who commanded the largest fleet in the galaxy, "I am pleased to report that galactic stability has reached an all-time high. Crime rates in the inner systems have dropped by 40%. Trade disputes have been resolved more efficiently than ever before. The removal of disruptive influences has allowed us to govern with unprecedented effectiveness. The Veltar representative raised one clawed hand in approval. The hegemony delegates nodded their many heads in agreement. Even the usually cautious Corvin Empire seemed pleased with the Admiral's report. Ambassador Zethkar leaned back in his chair, feeling genuinely satisfied for the first time in years. The human departure had indeed been a blessing in disguise. Without their constant interference and emotional outbursts, the Council could finally focus on practical governance instead of wasteful humanitarian projects. The Veltar expansion continues to bring stability to the former Chaos Zones, Kostar continued. 3 more systems have been successfully integrated into the Dominion. The local populations have accepted their new circumstances with minimal resistance. What the Admiral did not mention was that the latest Veltar expansion fleet had never reached its target. Just like the previous 2 fleets, it had simply vanished somewhere between the jump gate and its destination. The Veltar had blamed equipment failures and postponed their next expansion indefinitely. Pirate activity in the Outer Rim has been contained, Kostar said, pausing slightly as he chose his words. While some criminal organizations remain active, they no longer pose a significant threat to major trade routes. This was technically true, though the Admiral carefully avoided mentioning that entire pirate fleets had been disappearing without explanation. The survivors who made it back to civilization told strange stories about ships that appeared from nowhere, disabled their vessels without firing a shot, and then vanished again. Most people dismissed these tales as the desperate lies of criminals trying to explain their failures. In conclusion, Kostar said, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of triumph, the galaxy has never been more peaceful or more prosperous. The Council's decision to pursue stability over chaos has been vindicated by events. The applause was loud and enthusiastic. Even Delegate Saranthe, who had been one of the few voices of concern about the human departure, seemed satisfied with the Admiral's presentation, but Saranthe was not satisfied. She was terrified. After the session ended, she made her way to her private quarters on Nexus Station and activated her personal communication system. The holographic display showed her aide back on the Aldari homeworld, a young woman named Lyrith, who served as her intelligence coordinator. "Have you received the latest reports from our border scouts?" Saranthe asked without preamble. Lyrith H. nodded, her usually cheerful expression replaced by worry. "Yes, Delegate. The incidents are increasing in frequency. Last week alone, we recorded 15 separate sightings of unknown vessels near the edge of human space. Unknown vessels was their code phrase for the ships that appeared on sensors but could not be identified or contacted. They moved with impossible speed and stealth, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the void between stars." "Any response to our communication attempts?" Saranthe asked, though she already knew the answer. "None. The ships ignore all hails. All identification requests, all diplomatic overtures. They simply ... watch, and then they leave." Saranthe closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing thoughts. The Aldari were natural empaths, able to sense the emotional states of other species across vast distances. For the past year, she had been feeling something that chilled her to her core, a vast, patient anger emanating from the direction of human space. It was not the hot rage of warriors preparing for battle. It was something far more dangerous. The cold fury of people who had been betrayed and were now planning their response with careful precision. "Lyrith," she said quietly, "send a message to our embassy on Earth. I want to know what the humans are doing." Her aide's expression grew even more worried. "Delegate, we tried that 6 months ago." The message was returned with a polite note, saying that Earth is no longer accepting diplomatic communications from Council member species. "Then send it to one of their colonies, any of them. We have tried that as well. All human colonies have stopped responding to outside communications. It is as if they have cut themselves off from the rest of the galaxy completely." Saranthe felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years of diplomatic service, she had never encountered a species that could simply disappear like this. The humans had not just withdrawn from the Council, they had withdrawn from galactic civilization entirely. "Keep monitoring," she ordered. And if you detect any significant changes in human activity, notify me immediately. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, Captain Vextar was experiencing what he would later describe as the strangest week of his life. His cargo ship had been traveling through what used to be one of the most dangerous sectors in known space, a region where pirates had once operated with virtual impunity, but something had changed. The pirates were gone, not defeated, not driven away, simply gone. Their bases stood empty, their ships had vanished, and the few survivors who remained spoke in whispers about the shadows that came in the night. Vextar's ship detector suddenly began beeping, indicating the approach of another vessel. He tensed, expecting pirates, but the ship that appeared on his viewscreen was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was sleek and dark with no visible weapons or identifying marks. It matched his speed and course perfectly, staying exactly 1 kilometer away. Unknown vessel. Vextar broadcast on all frequencies. Please identify yourself. State your intentions. There was no response. The strange ship simply flew alongside his vessel for several minutes, as if scanning or observing. Then, without warning, it accelerated and disappeared into the darkness between stars. Similar encounters were being reported across the galaxy, but always in remote areas where a few people would believe the stories. The mysterious ships never attacked, never communicated, never interfered with normal operations. They simply watched and then vanished, back on Nexus Station. Security Chief Morden sat in his office reviewing incident reports that officially did not exist. His superiors had ordered him to classify all reports of unknown vessels as equipment malfunctions or sensor ghosts. The Council did not want to admit that something was happening beyond their understanding or control, but Morden knew better. He had been tracking the patterns for months, and what he had found was deeply disturbing. The unknown vessels were not random. They appeared to be conducting systematic reconnaissance of the entire galaxy, mapping trade routes, cataloging military installations, and monitoring the movements of every major fleet. It was the kind of intelligence gathering that an advanced military force would conduct before launching a major operation. "Sir," said his assistant, entering the office with a worried expression, "we have received another report from the Veltar Dominion. Their 4th expansion fleet has failed to reach its target." Morden was not surprised. He had predicted this would happen based on the patterns he had observed. The unknown vessels seemed particularly interested in Veltar military movements. "Any survivors?" he asked. "None, sir. The fleet simply vanished between the jump gate and their destination. No distress signals, no wreckage, no trace of what happened to them." Morden leaned back in his chair and stared at the star charts on his wall. Somewhere out there, the humans were planning something. He could feel it in his bones, the way a predator can sense when it has become the prey. The Council celebrated their improved stability and efficiency, but they were like children, playing in a house while adults planned their future around them. The humans had not fled in defeat. They had withdrawn to prepare for something that none of the Council species could imagine, and when that preparation was complete, Morden suspected that the galaxy would learn a very hard lesson about the consequences of dismissing those who had tried to help. The silence from human space was not empty. It was pregnant with purpose, and that purpose was almost ready to be born. The slave ship Crimson Harvest drifted through empty space, its engines dead and its hull cracked from the explosion that had torn through the engine room. Captain Thekvar of the Veltar Navy stood in his command center watching the life support. Readings dropped steadily toward 0. "How long do we have?" he asked his chief engineer, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we shut down all non-essential systems, the engineer replied. "The Council rescue ships will not arrive for at least 10 hours. Thekvar looked at the cargo manifest on his screen. 300 Keflin civilians, captured during the latest pacification operation. They were valuable assets, destined for the labor camps on Veltar industrial worlds. Losing them would be expensive, but that was not what worried him most. The explosion had not been an accident. Someone had sabotaged his ship, and that someone was probably still out there, watching and waiting. "Sir?" called the communications officer. "We are receiving a response to our distress signal from the Council fleet." "No, sir, unknown origin. They say they are willing to provide assistance." Vekvar felt a chill run down his spine. In the middle of empty space, far from any known shipping lanes, who could possibly have heard their distress call so quickly? "Put them on screen," he ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing the bridge of another ship. The being on the screen was humanoid but unfamiliar, wearing a simple gray uniform with no visible insignia. When it spoke, its voice was calm and professional. "Crimson Harvest, this is Captain Torres of the rescue vessel Aurora. We have received your distress signal and are prepared to offer immediate assistance." "Torres?" Vekvar repeated. The name sounded human, but that was impossible. Human space was hundreds of light years away, and no human ships had been seen in this sector for over 2 years. "What kind of assistance?" Vekvar asked cautiously. "Emergency life support and medical aid for your passengers," Torres replied. "We can have our rescue teams aboard your vessel within 15 minutes. Vekvar hesitated. Something about this felt wrong, but his ship was dying and 300 valuable slaves would be lost if he refused help. "Very well, but I warn you, this is a Veltar military vessel. Any attempt at piracy will be met with force." Torres smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Vekvar's blood run cold. "We understand completely, Captain. Our intentions are purely humanitarian." The rescue ship appeared on their sensors moments later, a sleek vessel unlike anything in the Council databases. It moved with impossible grace, sliding alongside the Crimson Harvest and extending docking tubes with perfect precision. Within minutes, figures in environmental suits were boarding the slave ship. They moved quickly and efficiently, heading straight for the cargo holds where the Kethlan prisoners were kept. Vekvar tried to follow them, but found his path blocked by other rescue workers who politely but firmly prevented him from leaving. "The bridge. What are you doing to my cargo?" he demanded over the communication system. "Providing medical assistance," came the calm reply. "Some of your passengers appear to be suffering from malnutrition and untreated injuries." Vekvar watched his internal monitors in growing alarm as the rescue workers opened the cargo holds and began leading the Kethlan civilians toward the docking tubes. The prisoners were not resisting. In fact, they seemed eager to follow their rescuers. "Stop!" Vekvar shouted. "Those are lawfully captured assets of the Veltar Dominion. You have no right to remove them." "We are providing emergency evacuation services," Torres replied, his voice still maddeningly calm. "Your ship is in danger of catastrophic life support failure. We are saving lives. They are not passengers, they are prisoners." "We see no difference," Torres said, and now his voice carried a hint of something harder than steel. "All sentient beings have the right to life and safety." Vekvar realized what was happening and activated his ship's emergency weapon systems. But nothing responded. Somehow, the rescue ship had disabled all of his vessel's offensive capabilities without him even noticing. "You are committing an act of piracy," he screamed into the communicator. "No," Torres replied quietly. "We are preventing a crime against sentient life. The Kethlan are now under our protection." The last of the Kethlan civilians disappeared through the docking tubes, followed by the rescue workers. Within moments, the mysterious ship had detached and was pulling away from the Crimson Harvest. "Wait," Vekvar called. "You cannot leave us here to die." "We are not leaving you to die," Torres said. "Your engines have been repaired and your life support systems restored. You will find your crew confined to quarters for their own safety. Council rescue ships will arrive in 8 hours to escort you to the nearest station." Vekvar looked at his status boards in amazement. Everything that had been broken was now working perfectly. His ship was functional again, but his cargo was gone. "Who are you?" he whispered. The face on the screen looked directly at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "We are the people you told to go away," Torres said simply. "And we did. But we never stopped caring about those who could not protect themselves." The communication cut off, and the rescue ship vanished into the darkness between stars. leaving behind only a single message on the Crimson Harvest communication system. The Kethlin are under protection. News of the incident reached Nexus Station within hours, but the official response was swift and predictable. The report was classified, the witnesses were debriefed and sworn to secrecy, and the whole affair was dismissed as an unfortunate case of equipment failure and pirate activity. But similar incidents began happening across the galaxy with increasing frequency. On the industrial world of Korvax 3, a corrupt administrator named Gethmal discovered that his private accounts had been emptied overnight. Every credit he had stolen from the worker relief funds had vanished, along with detailed records of his crimes. The missing money appeared in the accounts of the workers' families, along with evidence packages that were delivered to law enforcement agencies. Gethmal tried to flee the planet, but his personal transport suffered a mysterious malfunction that forced him to return to the surface, where investigators were waiting with arrest warrants. In the hegemony territories, a slave market on the remote world of Direct 7 simply ceased to exist. The guards were found unconscious but unharmed, locked in their own cells. The slaves had vanished completely, along with all records of their origins and destinations. The only thing left behind was a message painted on the market's main gate. Freedom is not negotiable. Pirate bases throughout the Outer Rim were found empty, their occupants gone without a trace. Some showed signs of recent habitation, meals half-eaten, equipment still warm, but no people. It was as if entire crews had simply vanished into thin air. War criminals who had thought themselves safe behind layers of bureaucracy and legal protection began disappearing from their homes and offices. They would reappear days later in the custody of law enforcement agencies, along with detailed evidence of their crimes. When questioned, they could remember nothing about their capture except voices in the darkness, speaking of justice and accountability. Council intelligence tried to investigate these incidents, but their efforts were frustrated at every turn. Security cameras malfunctioned at crucial moments. Computer systems developed mysterious glitches that erased important data. Witnesses suffered convenient memory lapses. It was as if some invisible force was actively working to prevent any investigation. From succeeding. Ambassador Zethkar sat in his office on Nexus Station, reading report after report of impossible events. His hands shook as he turned the pages, each incident more disturbing than the last. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. Someone was systematically targeting the corrupt, the cruel, and the criminal throughout the galaxy. "Sir," said his assistant, entering the office with another stack of classified documents. "We have received reports of similar incidents from 17 more systems. The Veltar are demanding a council investigation into what they are calling organized terrorism." Zethkar laughed bitterly. "Terrorism? No, this is something far worse. This is justice." His assistant looked confused. "Sir?" Zethkar stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were keeping their promise. They had said they would not interfere with council affairs, and technically they were not. They were not attacking council military forces or disrupting legitimate government operations, but they had also made it clear that they would protect those who could not protect themselves. And they were doing exactly that, with a precision and efficiency that terrified anyone who understood what it meant. "Contact Admiral Kostar," Zethkar ordered. "Tell him I need to speak with him immediately. And get me everything we have on human military capabilities from before they left the council." As his assistant hurried to comply, Zethkar continued staring out at the stars. The quiet exodus was revealing its true purpose at last, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face the judgment of a species that had tried diplomacy first and been rejected. The reckoning had begun, and there was nowhere left to hide. Admiral Kostar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Dominion's Will, and watched as his task force prepared for the jump to human space. 27 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy surrounded his vessel, their weapons charged and their crews ready for battle. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "all ships are reporting ready for departure. Shall I give the order to jump?" Kostar nodded grimly. The council had finally decided to act. After months of mysterious incidents and unexplained disappearances, they were going to demand answers from the humans. If the humans refused to cooperate, the task force was authorized to use whatever force was necessary to restore order. "Proceed," Kostar ordered. "It is time to remind these humans that the Council's authority extends throughout the galaxy." The fleet vanished in a burst of twisted space-time, heading toward the edge of human territory. Their destination was the human colony of New Geneva, a peaceful farming world that had once maintained regular contact with the galactic community. If the humans wanted to play games, Kostar would start with their most defenseless settlements. The journey took 18 hours, and when they emerged from hyperspace, Kostar was surprised by what he found. New Geneva looked exactly as it had 3 years ago: green fields, small cities, orbital stations conducting routine business. There were no obvious military installations, no defensive fleets, no signs that the humans were preparing for war. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Kostar ordered. The main screen showed a middle-aged human woman sitting in what appeared to be a simple office. She wore civilian clothes and had the calm expression of someone who dealt with administrative matters rather than military conflicts. "Welcome to New Geneva," she said pleasantly. "I am Administrator Walsh. How can we help you today?" Kostar was taken aback by her casual tone. He had expected demands, threats, or at least some sign of concern about the massive fleet that had just appeared in their system. "I am Admiral Kostar of the Galactic Council," he announced formally. "We are here to investigate reports of illegal military activities conducted by human forces against Council member species." Administrator Walsh smiled politely. "I am afraid there has been some mistake, Admiral. New Geneva is a peaceful agricultural colony. We have no military forces and conduct no operations outside our own system." "Do not lie to me," Kostar snapped. "We have evidence that human ships have been attacking Veltar vessels and interfering with lawful Council operations." "That is a serious accusation," Walsh replied, her tone still maddeningly calm. "Do you have proof that these ships originated from New Geneva, or from any human colony for that matter?" Kostar hesitated. The truth was that they had no such proof. The mysterious ships that had been appearing throughout the galaxy bore no identifying marks and had never been traced back to any specific location. "The Council demands access to your records and facilities," he said instead. "We will conduct a full investigation of this colony and any others we deem necessary." Administrator Walsh's expression grew cooler. "I am afraid that will not be possible, Admiral. As you know, humanity formally withdrew from the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Your organization has no legal authority in human space." "Legal authority?" Kostar laughed harshly. "I have 27 warships. That is all the authority I need." "I see," Walsh said quietly. "So the Council has decided to abandon diplomacy in favor of force. How ... predictable." She touched something on her desk, and suddenly the space around Kostar's fleet was no longer empty. Ships began appearing from nowhere, not the small patrol vessels he had expected, but massive constructs that dwarfed even his own dreadnought. They moved with impossible grace, positioning themselves around the Council fleet with mathematical precision. "What ... What are those?" whispered his tactical officer. Kostar stared at the screens in shock. The human ships were unlike anything in the Council databases. They seemed to bend light around themselves, making it difficult to focus on their true shape or size. Their hulls showed no visible weapons, but energy readings suggested power levels that should have been impossible for vessels of their apparent size. "Admiral," Administrator Walsh continued, her voice now carrying an edge of steel, "you are currently surrounded by 12 human defense platforms. Each one is capable of disabling your entire fleet without causing permanent harm to your crews. We strongly suggest that you reconsider your aggressive posture." "You are bluffing," Kostar sighed, but his voice lacked conviction. "No single ship could threaten a Council dreadnought. Would you like a demonstration?" Walsh asked politely. Before Kostar could respond, every system on his flagship went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on, but all weapons, shields, and engines were completely offline. Around him, he could see the other ships in his fleet suffering the same fate, drifting helplessly in space like toys in a bathtub. Fascinating technology, Walsh observed. We have temporarily disrupted your quantum field generators. Your ships are completely functional, but they cannot access any power sources until we reactivate the fields. Your crews are in no danger, but you are also in no position to threaten anyone. Kostar felt sweat running down his face despite the cool air on his bridge. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans had disabled his entire fleet without firing a single shot. How? He whispered. We had 3 years to prepare, Walsh said simply. 3 years to develop new technologies, new strategies, new ways of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Did you really think we spent that time doing nothing? The Admiral's communication system crackled to life with panicked reports from his other ships. Every vessel in the fleet was experiencing the same total power failure. They were completely helpless. What do you want? Kostar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want what we have always wanted, Walsh replied. Justice, peace, protection for the innocent. The same things we tried to achieve while working with the Council. The Council maintains order throughout the galaxy, Kostar protested weakly. The Council maintains the status quo, Walsh corrected. There is a difference. Your organization allows the strong to prey on the weak as long as proper paperwork is filed. We find that unacceptable. Administrator Walsh stood up from her desk and walked closer to the camera. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. 3 years ago, we tried to work within your system. We offered our help, our protection, our friendship. You showed us that such cooperation was neither wanted nor valued. We respect your choice. We will not interfere with your internal affairs. Again, she paused, letting her words sink in. But neither will we allow you to interfere with ours. And we will not stand by while the innocent suffer because your bureaucracy values procedure over justice. You cannot police the entire galaxy. Kostar said desperately. Walsh smiled, and for the first time it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, we are not policing the galaxy. We are simply ensuring that certain actions have consequences. When someone commits crimes against the defenseless, we act. When corrupt officials steal from the poor, we redistribute their wealth. When military forces threaten civilians, we intervene. The Admiral realized with growing horror what she was describing. You have been watching everything, monitoring all of us. For 3 years, Walsh confirmed. We know about every illegal slave market, every corrupt politician, every war criminal who thinks they are beyond justice. We have files on all of them, and we are working through the list systematically. Kostar's hands trembled as he considered the implications. If the humans had been observing Council activities for 3 years, they would know about things that even he preferred not to think about. Actions taken for the greater good, decisions made in the name of stability, compromises that kept the peace but left victims in their wake. What about the Council? He asked quietly. What about us? You are welcome to continue governing as you see fit, Walsh said. We will not interfere with legitimate government operations or lawful Council activities. But we will also not pretend that your authority extends to human space or to those we have chosen to protect. She touched her desk again, and power began returning to the Council ships. Engines came online, weapon systems reactivated, and shields reformed around their hulls. But the human vessels remained where they were, a silent reminder of how quickly that power could be taken away again. Admiral, Walsh said as her image prepared to fade from the screen, we suggest you return to Council space and inform your superiors of the new reality. The galaxy is big enough for both of our approaches to coexist, as long as you remember that some lines cannot be crossed. The transmission ended, leaving Kostar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore full operational status to their systems, but he barely noticed their efforts. The quiet exodus had revealed its true nature at last. The humans had not fled in defeat or withdrawn in anger. They had transformed themselves into something that the Council could not understand, control, or intimidate. They had become the guardians that the galaxy needed but did not want.